New Buddhaware Dhamma Talks. Jeff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
I want to use the metaphor of fishing in your mind and learning to become aware of what is going on in your own mind. And we could compare it to sitting on the bank of the river with a fishing rod. And of course, every so often they do catch a fish. And you see the fish moving about, little ones, big ones. Now these are like thoughts, you see, right? This is where the metaphor is working here. So there are some fish that are swimming downstream, right? That's like the thoughts drifting into the future. And then you've got some stubborn fish that are trying to swim upstream, which is really hard work. And that's like looking into the past, the thoughts about the past that come in. And then you get occasionally a fish that seems to be standing still. It's kind of using as much energy as is necessary to overcome the drift of the water, so it's staying in one place. That's like being in the present. Of course, you might notice the fish and catch it, or you might not notice the fish, but you might catch a fish even though you haven't noticed it. It might be in deep water, and of course some thoughts seem to emerge from the depths there somewhere. We don't know why. In fact, most of them seem to emerge from the depths and take us by surprise sometimes. Have you ever said to yourself, why am I thinking that? Didn't expect that. Of course, it also happens when we're unconscious or semi-conscious, that is sleeping, that all sorts of things drift up. So the mind is like that deep water, isn't it? That things drift up from the bottom. We know not why. Sometimes, as in deep water, there are things lurking down there that we don't like very much. Like you might not like eels very much. You know, they stay on the bottom, don't appeal to everyone. So you can imagine the mind as being rather like a slow-moving river, which has its rapids as well, but a slow-moving river with a depth. And the fish are the thoughts, or if you like, thoughts and feelings or moods, but let's stick with thoughts. Thoughts are things which are very difficult to define, but the psychologists try to define them as some things that arise in the mind which have a verbal dimension, that is somehow connected with language, and images, and tend to form some sort of narrative, but in a very haphazard sort of way. Okay, now we can learn to actually be aware of that. Most of us spend a lot of time actually thinking without being aware that we're thinking. That sounds strange, doesn't it? I mean, how could that be happening? How could we be thinking without being aware that we're thinking? It's a big leap forward to be aware of that one is thinking and what one is thinking. Not necessarily asking why one is thinking it, but simply being aware that thinking is going on. And then become aware of the character of that thinking, whether, for example, it's anxious thinking, worry, or whether it's regretful thinking. Worrying is future-oriented, so that's the fish that's going with the flow. Regret, remorse, past-oriented, blame, or whatever is past-oriented. So that's the fish swimming against the current, and there's often a lot of pain attached to that as well. So to become aware of thoughts is actually to become aware of either the suffering that's in the mind or the hope and joy that is in the mind from time to time. Okay? So you're getting to know yourself, but you're also doing something deeper, which is of great interest to the Buddha, and that is that you're learning to question being me, being what am I? Because we would assume that my thinking is mine, or even that thought is me. This is mine, this I am, this is myself. That is a phrase that the Buddha uses many, many times and is at the very heart of his thinking, because he's trying to wake us up to how we form, construct the self, or how it emerges, and start to question that, because in his view, that is the source of a lot of our the major source, the root, he calls it the root delusion, is that I am a separate self. Now, I know it probably sounds unconvincing at first that there isn't a separate, independent self. There is a self, if you like, but it's a fuzzy, shifting, temporary self. And it's liberating to know that and to see it at work. If you learn to watch your thoughts, that's one way of starting to take some distance on understanding the source of one's mistakes in life, one's unhappiness, one's cravings, one's sense of dissatisfaction, and move one to a much more accepting and wise place. So when we are fishing, we can take that as a metaphor for what we can do when we are meditating. Now, so you're sitting down, focusing on the breath, watching the motion of the breath. So the breath is what we call the object of meditation. It's a way of getting the mind to rest by asking it to do one thing. So it's got to let go of everything except the one thing you've given it. And then it will feel tranquil. Why is it tranquil? Because it's resting in one place and it's not trying to manipulate or keep in focus everything else around it. Okay. Now, we all know that when we do that, the mind resists that. Or let's say something going on in the mind resists that. So that you'll be just making the effort. The Buddha talks a lot about effort, to stay with the breathing, which becomes easier as you go along. But the mind will apparently, or something in the mind, let's say, keeps wandering off. Now, this is where we have a great opportunity to learn about ourselves. So far from thinking of the wandering off as being just an irritation or a failure, it is a source of knowledge, self-knowledge. So you've got a split second to think, what was that? What was that? But without explanation, without description, without judgment, just now do it in this way. In the Buddhist teachings, we find reference to the 3 times. The 3 times are past, present, future. Past, something going on in the present, like say you hear a car door slamming and you start thinking, I wonder who that is. Are they coming here? You've now stopped paying attention to the breathing. That's thinking present. Or thinking future. The future could be just the future leaving here. Or it could be 10 years' time. Where will I be in 10 years' time? We've got another one, which is very strong in the present age with most of us, and that is fantasizing. What is fantasizing? It's not strictly speaking past, present, or future. It exists in a little domain of its own, where we are thinking what might be, or what should be, or what could be, or what ought to be. But the fact is, it's not in the past, it's not in the present, it's not in the future. Because you don't have to think up thoughts, because it will just arise. Is it thinking past? Is it thinking present? Thinking future? Fantasizing. Within a very short period, you will know what it is. So you just stick a label on it, thinking past, goodbye, back to focusing on the breathing. It's very important not to dwell on it, because if you give it half a chance, it will carry you off into wonderful realms of fantasy, or frightening realms of fantasy. There's anxiety in there as well, so it can take you to very scary places. It's just the whole rigmarole that Buddha spelt out, with greed, hatred, anxiety, pride, all the rest of it. Swing around and around and around. The content might be different, so you might be fantasizing about a different, job from the fantasy that I'm thinking about, but that doesn't matter. They're both fantasies. So all you have to say to yourself is fantasizing. Return to the breathing. Continue for another, 5 seconds, and thinking past. You notice that you're thinking past, right? That's all you say. Thinking past, return immediately to following the breathing again. You go on like that. Without sufficient tranquility, we can't really make much progress in self-understanding, because the mind is just too agitated. It's like we want to see, to take another metaphor, we want to see the reflection on the surface of the pond. If it's agitated, we cannot see. So there could be a lovely cedar of Lebanon tree. If it's reflected in the pond, that looks nice. But I'm not going to see that reflection if the pond is agitated. So I'm not going to really be in a position to learn a lot about how my mind works if it's agitated. So I've got to bring it down to a level of tranquility at which the reflections and the arisings become very clear, alarmingly clear occasionally, but joyfully clear other times, because you have a potential for generosity, for gratitude, and all those things that lift you up. We want to be lifted up. We don't want to be dragged down to the bottom of the pond where the eels are. Right. So, shall we try this? All I want you to do is to close your eyes, start focusing on the motion of the breathing. Try your best to stay with that. Don't try to conjure up thoughts. Just try to stay with the breathing, because the arisings will be there. You can't stop them, not without a huge amount of practice. When a thought comes into the mind, as it will, just label it. Thinking past, thinking present, thinking future, fantasizing. Just the label. Nothing else that needs to be done. And immediately return to watching the breathing. Right, let's give it a try. I'll just tinkle the bell, and then when it tinkles again, that'll be the end of that practice. Follow the breathing.
New Buddha Way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.